Alright, now you're about to see how the sausage is made. It's boring as hell. I'm going to be editing chapter 17. I'm a quarter of the way done through this section of the book, of the Anti-Net book. This chapter is called The Myths of Zettelkasten. Okay. The Anti-Net, with its emphasis on writing by hand, by the way, I read out loud because that's how you can really hear how things are going to sound. And that's a tactic used by many copywriters and probably actual writers of actual books as well. Okay. The Anti-Net, with its emphasis on writing by hand, develops one's faculties for later recollection and for recognizing interesting patterns upon rereading what has been written. Familiarity, which entails repeated exposure to an idea or concept, is developed by writing by hand and by reviewing information during the process of searching through one's Anti-Net. Recollection, the process in which we recall what we have become familiar with. I'm not going to. Recollection, the process in which we recall what we have become familiar with, is enhanced through the process of developing thoughts within contexts of the Anti-Net. Here, contexts refers to the branches and stems of thought you develop in your Anti-Net, which these branches and stems over time form your own quote, your own tree of knowledge. As knowledge scientists have observed, both familiarity and recollection paradoxically transform note-taking from a system designed to store memories into a system that both stores and enhances memories. Both stores, I'm going to emphasize the and, that sounds better. Stores and enhances memories. Recall that memories are your mind's representation of stored thought, and a thought is your mind's metaphysical representation of physical reality. As one knowledge scientist writes, handwritten note-taking. I like to put note-taking as one word because it just is backing better and awesome that way. Let me see here. Note-taking. Yeah. Okay. Anyway. This is my old checklist, my to-dos that are globally going to be reminders for me to run through at the end of writing the book. So, I also do things like this. Note-taking to note-taking. Okay. Due to repetition that helps the mind retain passages, and the respective construction of a card index are considered both a substitute of personal memory and a memory aid. That is a footnote. Okay, Seppellini forgetting machines. Cool. Great. Grand. Wonderful. The human memory is complex, important, and in many ways still a mystery. When Luhmann began building his Anti-Net, he was motivated by his poor memory, yet he discovered that the system he built turned into something far greater and capable of enhancing memory and overcoming two types of memory interference. Retroactive interference. When Luhmann set out to build his Anti-Net, he was trying to mitigate. Why doesn't it understand the word mitigate? Learn spelling, dumbass. Alright. Luhmann set out. I hope you enjoy this internal dialogue that I'm now speaking out loud so that you can hear the shit that goes through my head while I write. Okay, when Luhmann set out to build his Anti-Net, he was trying to mitigate against retroactive interference. That is, he hoped that upon learning something new, he wouldn't forget what he had already previously invested energy into. When Luhmann set out to build his Anti-Net, Zettelkasten. just to not confuse people, let's call it a Zettelkasten when I'm talking about Lumen, okay? He was trying to mitigate against retroactive interference. That is, he hoped that upon learning something new, he wouldn't forget what he had already previously invested energy into learning. In practice, Luhmann's antinet forced him to go back and review what he had already learned in order to pick up where he had last left off. This enabled him to refresh his memory of the already learned concept. Okay, we're making our way through this. This enabled him to refresh his memory of the already learned concept and spot any contradictions in his memory when processing and writing out thoughts about the new aspects of the concept to which he was introduced. Luhmann would thereby install a new concept behind the most related concept that was already filed in his antinet. Let's call it Zettelkasten for consistency. God, I'm just like having the cycles go through my head of, calling it antinet or Zettelkasten in the context of this type of chapter, because Zettelkasten just means note box, but what Luhmann built is not just a note box, it's an antinet note box. It's one founded on the 4 principles of the antinet, but bottom line, I'm just going to keep going. Okay. Proactive interference. Proactive interference prevents us from thinking clearly too, through being our own worst enemy due to false beliefs. Remember that we carry information with us everywhere we go, whether in the form of facts, beliefs, knowledge, or opinions. These are all just metaphysical representations of reality that rely on our memory for their operation. There's one problem with this, though. There's one problem with this, however. One's memory may be based on assumptions and oversimplified representations maintained in order to support the whole story. In other words, human memory is a whole system made up of subsystems. Sometimes the content of the subsystems, the exact memory that motivates a particular response, is missing, but is unquestionably assumed in order to fill out the bigger picture of the story you're telling yourself. These assumptions, while useful and sometimes accurate, are also not perfect. They can go unquestioned and unanalyzed for years. Sorry. Gotta stretch my back sometimes. They can go unquestioned and unanalyzed for years, which in turn prevents new, deeper, elevated learning. Think of your memory as having a cache of instant, instinctive responses. For example, whenever you write the date, you write the current year. However, in the first few days of a new year, it's common to catch oneself writing the wrong date. You write last year's date. This is essentially like muscle memory, in which you do something so often that you hammer it into your mind and almost repeat it like a robot without thinking about it. The antinet snaps you out of this autopilot robot-like state. Instead of reading new material and just accepting it as fact, the system prompts you to check retroactively and peruse your knowledge. Okay, I'm getting it right. The antinet prompts you. The antinet forces you, not prompts you. The antinet forces you to check retroactively and peruse your knowledge. You must exercise your mind to find and search for the most related idea already installed in your antinet, at which point you're likely to come across contradictory knowledge, or perhaps even discover previous thoughts that indicate you've already thought of such a thing. In either case, you're snapped out of your autopilot muscle memory state of mind. You are forced to either elaborate on the thought or explain why the contradiction is incorrect. Did I add? Okay, yeah, I added. Emphasis added. Okay. Intelligence is traditionally viewed as the ability to think and learn, yet in a turbulent world, there's another set of cognitive skills that might matter more: the ability to rethink and unlearn. In summary, Zettelkasten In summary, the Zettelkasten is not just a tool for storing notes. I want to compare this with my previous draft for the one where, yeah, I like putting it in a call out block. In summary, the Zettelkasten is not just a tool for storing notes or for storing memories or thoughts. It's a tool that also enhances, aids, and supercharges your own memory so that you can communicate and dialogue with it as if it were a separate mind. Okay. I like communicate with it as if it were a separate mind. It enables you to also avoid the pitfalls of retroactive and proactive interference in human memory. Okay. The myth that the Zettelkasten is a memory tool. While the Zettelkasten is certainly a useful tool for storing memories and enhancing your own memory, it's not a memory tool alone. The Antinet is a thinking tool. Its raw materials are thoughts, and its thoughts are developed through one thing: thinking. A key reason the Antinet is not a memory tool but a thinking tool centers on its proficiency in encouraging the surfacing of the parts of your thinking that are, upon further rumination, actually potentially inaccurate. The Antinet, thanks to its structure in analog form, ends up bringing to the surface, exposing and evolving your thoughts in a manner different than its digital cousins. The Antinet, thanks to its structure in analog form, ends up bringing to surface that sounds okay. Ends up bringing to surface, exposing and bringing to surface your thoughts in a manner, to surface, exposing and evolving your thoughts in a manner different than its digital cousins. The idea of Zettelkasten as a thinking tool is not earth-shattering. The knowledge scientist Johannes Schmidt, who studied Lewin Zettelkasten in person, who studies I don't need to do that preamble for him. The knowledge scientist Johannes Schmidt holds it as a thinking tool. Even Sankei Arens holds it as a thinking system, something primarily used to develop ideas. It's therefore puzzling that Arens does not make the case for analog as the preferred medium for his Zettelkasten, given that he knows the power of writing by hand, even dedicating a section of his book to Richard Feynman's example that illustrates that writing thoughts on paper is the same thing as thinking. Regardless of Arens' oversight, the fact is, the Zettelkasten is not primarily a tool for aiding one's core memory. It's just as much a tool for developing one's thoughts, both in the short term, through writing by hand, and two, both one, in the short term through writing by hand, and two, in the long term through evolving thoughts. The myth that the index is something that can simply be replaced by digital search. Of Sankei Arens' many questionable claims about Zettelkasten, one relates to the Zettelkasten's index, about which he says, "Indexes are helpful but not at all central features of a Zettelkasten. They're just entries. In brief, this notion is absurd." The index serves several purposes. Lewin says we must regulate the process of the rediscovery of notes. The solution to that is the index. The index forces you to stamp in neuroimprint, a key term on your mind. It enables you to explore your anti-net and stumble upon accidents and creative insights. It enables you to read differently because you've undertaken the deliberate process of stamping the key term in your mind. I want key term to be one word. Bastards. Bastard spell check. It's another thing I am going to make sure happens. Key term needs to be key term. I thought there was a shortcut for viewing and shifting into tabs. What is this one? Yeah, we're gonna have to change this. So, keyboard, I think Max keyboard, yeah, shortcuts. I am going to, because I'm going to create a new shortcut inside Ulysses. And I believe it is, let's figure out what this is. It is Window Show Previous Tab. And I want the shortcut to be this. Boom. And then Window, I think it's probably Show Next Tab. Show Next Tab. Show Next Tab. I want it to be this. Before you learn to use this, you must learn to use this. It's a nice little Braveheart quote for you. Okay. Damn it! It didn't fucking work. The keyboard shortcut. This is the life. Okay. That was weird. What? Yeah, see, it's like that. Keyboard shortcuts, it's not overriding and whatever. I mean, I don't want to major in the minor here, but whatever. It's hard for someone with ADHD. I want to set my hotkeys to be perfectly like I want it to be. Yet, what is that? Command Shift right. Such horrible hotkeys, Ulysses. Come on. Let me just search this. This is just awful. Ulysses keyboard shortcuts. Customize. Don't I have? Oh yeah, I have this app called Mouseless, I think. Just saw Ulysses, I think. Yeah. View, navigation. I don't know. When one searches by way of shuffling through cards, they learn the material. To support this claim, Arens first cites Hermann Ebbinghaus, whom he calls the godfather of learning theory. Arens cites research espousing the power and benefits of elaborative rehearsal, essentially elaborating on material by explaining something in your own words. This process, in conjunction with human memory, is different from that which is called maintenance rehearsal, which relates to the process of repeating a thought, or in the anti-net case, reviewing note cards while shuffling through them. Initially, the scholars Craik and Lockhart put forth their theory that elaborate rehearsal produces long-term retention. Maintenance rehearsal does not. Later, however, other research disproved this claim, finding that maintenance rehearsal does, in fact, produce enhanced long-term recall. With that said, the effect of maintenance rehearsal is weaker than the effect of elaborate rehearsal on long-term learning. Thankfully, the anti-net requires both elaborative rehearsal and maintenance rehearsal to use. In brief, Arens cites outdated research. That is, the anti-net requires one to review material and elaborate on material to use. In brief, Arens cites outdated research that has since been proven wrong. As a result, he overlooks the benefits of maintenance rehearsal that increases the long-term recall of thoughts. He overlooks the benefits of maintenance rehearsal, which increases the long-term recall of thoughts. By simply stripping this process from the Zettelkasten and replacing it with a digital search function, you're effectively stripping the Zettelkasten of its full power. The information you review while searching for specific digital information is not the same as reading, processing, and sifting physically through your cards one by one. The myth that there should be one note card for each idea. In How to Take Smart Notes, Sake Arens instructs, write exactly one note for each idea and write as if you were writing for someone else. This is a notion that has created a cascading waterfall of misinformation. Prompted by Arens' assertion, many claim Luhmann's Zettelkasten was all about atomicity. Here's another trick. People are like walking around or opening doors there. My favorite color is green. Green earplugs. Freaking absolutely crucial. Okay. I'll leave one out though, because that way I can kind of hear myself. I'm not sure where Arens gets the notion of creating one note per idea. One need only spend a short time viewing Luhmann's online archive. So I need to elaborate online archive to find numerous instances of notes containing more than one note card for each idea. Not only does Luhmann not subscribe to the Arensian notion of one note per idea, Luhmann also starts related but new ideas in the bottom half of his cards, only to have them flow over onto the next card. For instance, let's look at a card from Luhmann's first Zettelkasten. Adjust the size here. The 240. Cool. A partial translation is as follows. The assumption of substantive values and ideals that stand behind the organizational rules which they serve as it were, is unscientific. Namely, so these are Luhmann's quotes and his words of this card. Note how Luhmann starts an excerpt near the bottom of the note card. P119. Keys calm, firm, cool. quote continues onto the next card, 7 point. For instance, let's look at card 7.9 from Lumen's first Zettelkasten. Okay. Its partial translation is as follows. From this, we see that Lumen continues the French quote on the top of the card. After finishing it, he reformulates and reflects on the excerpt, and then he adds another reformulation note. Then Lumen writes a reformulation and reflection of an idea he reads on the next page of a book he was reading, from which he excerpted the French quote. We see Lumen's reformulation and reflection of the note starting with P120, the innocence and purpose of human coexistence, ... For another instance of Lumen using multiple cards for one idea, with thoughts starting on one card and finishing halfway through the other through another card, one can consult Lumen's note cards. Lumen's cards. Yeah. Going to do a sanity check to make sure that these links don't break, because when my copy editor and I transfer between Word and Markdown, okay, cool, they work. Looks like his site is down again. His digital copy doesn't know. That's fine. We're doing an update, it seems like, in Bielefeld, Johannes Schmidt, because there's usually the image there. Okay. Examples from Lumen's second Zettelkasten. This practice of using multiple note cards for one idea isn't confined to Lumen's first Zettelkasten. It's also prevalent in Lumen's second Zettelkasten too. Take, for instance, cards 21 blah 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 in a second Zettelkasten. Okay. Cool. This displays a reflection note beginning on the first card and continuing onto the second card. Here's the English translation of the cards. The complexity of the system cannot be used to infer. Okay. Yeah. Clearly, this does not abide by Sankey Arendt's rule that notes should be atomic and confined to one note card per one idea. Why? Because that rule is a myth. 3. Lumen himself on ideas spanning multiple cards. Lumen himself indicates that his ideas span multiple note cards. For instance, in his paper, Communication with Note Boxes, Lumen writes, "The disadvantage is that the originally continuous text is often broken up by hundreds of intermediate slips. But if we systematically number the papers, we can find the original textual whole easily." What Lumen is referring to is the disadvantage of internal branching brought forth by the tree structure of the anti-net Zettelkasten. When you insert new note cards behind the cards already created, you break apart the original idea which flowed across multiple cards. In other words, you break apart the original idea that was encompassed in originally contiguous, because that's kind of how human memory is. Wait, how do we spell contiguous? Contiguous. Yeah. Contiguous. Across multiple cards. Actually, I can't use that because Lumen himself used the word continuous. So let's stick to that. Across multiple cards. This dismisses the notion that Lumen carefully constructed his Zettelkasten system in an atomic fashion, such that one note encompasses one idea. Multiple cards contained an originally continuous text, a line of thought, if you will. I find that in my own experience, a single idea is much more like a line of thought spanning multiple cards, 2 to 5 cards. Of course, each of those cards can be further broken apart and evolved more fully, which is what Luhmann was talking about in terms of internal branching. The main idea in its original form spans numerous cards representing a single line of thought. To believe that an idea, which is really a line of thought, must be somehow condensed to fit on one card is very limiting and unnatural. Luhmann did not abide by such a rule, and neither should you. When developing your thoughts and ideas, you're thinking on paper. You really don't know where you're going to go with the thought. It's a stream of consciousness experience. We don't often find Luhmann identifying what a card actually encompasses until he's finished writing it. At the bottom of the card, you'll find an underlined sentence which essentially summarizes the point he's just made above. For example, take the following card from Luhmann's second Zettelkasten. I'm going to delete these footnotes because I already have the source in the image. In English, this card translates to the following. 982, staff has long been scarce and expensive. Now it's becoming additionally unruly and unmanageable. The Microsoft are announced, but not fully available yet. Your own memory is defective and in need of relief. Reflections on an attempt to create a second memory. Note how the following text at the bottom of the card is outlined in red. Reflections is... outlined in red? No, underlined in red. Reflections on an attempt to create a second memory. Luhmann was essentially summarizing the ideas he laid out on the card after he created it. In my experience, I wonder if I did that on the earlier one, after he created it. Laid out on the card. Come on, bastards. Okay. In my experience, I've naturally found myself doing this as well. You don't necessarily know what you're going to write until you write it by hand. There's a magic to letting your thoughts disentangle themselves when they pass through your fingertips. To limit this magic to some made-up notion that the notes should be concise, atomic, and confined to one card is both absurd and counterproductive. You don't want to be thinking of such nonsensical rules when thinking and trying to develop your thoughts. Latter-day Arensians propagating this myth. From Sankei Arens's errant notion of one note per idea, we find a flood of latter-day Arensians spreading this myth as well. God, I love this. Yay, I'm getting happier. Okay. For instance, take one, I don't want to mention Tiago Forte. He's cool, he's well-intentioned and stuff, but I think it's distracting maybe to... Let's see this. Let me see how many mentions I have with this guy Tiago Forte. Tiago Forte is interesting character for sure. He's yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have nothing to say on him. He's interesting. I've never taken one of his courses either, so I'm not sure how valuable it actually is. Yeah, I'll save my reservations for that. So anyways, for instance, take Tiago Forte, who declares himself to be one of the world's foremost experts on productivity. Forte writes, quote, Luhmann limited himself to one idea per card so they could be referenced individually. Tiago has a wide audience with a Twitter following of 60,000 people and 23,900 subscribers on YouTube at the time of this writing. I kind of want to cut out the specific figures so people don't get distracted and like look up what he has when they read it, you know, it kind of ages the material. So Tiago has a wide audience with tens of thousands of followers on Twitter and YouTube. This large audience is being led to believe that the Zettelkasten operates in such a way. In reality, this couldn't be further from the truth. So, yeah, I kind of like the idea of... So, let's call this guy... I mean, I don't know if I should name them or not. I think it's fine. I'm not like bashing their character or anything. I'm just showing that they are propagating these Arenzian myths that aren't accurate to what a Zettelkasten actually is. So, I mean, should I hedge around it? That is the question. What would Cal Newport do? Cal Newport usually makes it quite vague and doesn't shit on people individually. But I'm not really I'm not attacking this. It's not an ad hominem attack. Just saying that he is propagating an Arenzian myth. So, I don't know. Maybe I'll just keep it. Alright. So if you're still watching this video, in the comments let me know if I should keep the term and the name Tiago Forte and David Kadavi, or if I should make them nameless. Who knows? Okay, but right now, alright. Another latter-day Arenzian. God, I love this concept of calling them latter-day Arenzians. Because, okay, so let me just see if latter-day is capitalized. Latter-day Saint. Yeah, I think... Do I capitalize latter day or not? Anti-net book legacy. Latter day. Yeah, I used to. I'll just leave it. I'm gonna err on the side of betting that my copy editor is correct and I should not capitalize latter day, so we're just gonna leave it at that. Alright, another latter-day Arenzian is David Kadavi, who wrote a book outlining how digital Zettelkasten works. Kadavi states, permanent notes should have one idea per note. Two things are wrong with such advice. However, two things are wrong with such advice. First, Lumen never used the term or concept of permanent notes. And second, one idea per note is a notion that was never proposed by Lumen. These are but two examples of this myth being spread, particularly through online sources. There are few who know the truth about Zettelkasten. It is not about one idea per note. Don't fall prey to this rule. Let your thoughts flow on paper. Do not be held back. Write and grow freely. The best way to learn what Lumen actually did. The best way to learn what Lumen did is to do things the hard way. Write out Lumen's note cards by hand. This process is how I uncovered many of the myths of the Zettelkasten. This concept is not something I invented, it's something I picked up from one of the best copywriters. God damn it. Fucking shift key on this Mac keyboard is horse shit. Okay, copywriters of all time. The concept utilizes neuroimprinting, which I will bring up again and again throughout this book. Again and again throughout this book. Neuroimprinting entails learning something deeply by writing it down by hand. When one navigates Lumen's online archive and writes down Lumen's notes by hand, they pick up things that the casual observer most likely will miss. When one navigates Lumen's online archive and writes down Lumen's notes by hand, they pick up things. They pick up on things. They pick up on things that the casual observer most likely misses. Okay, that'll make it more active form, whatever bullshit. I should have paid attention in grammar class. Okay. This process is, I don't want to grammar class. I have no idea what a dangly participle is. Fuck that term. Fuck grammar. Alright, let's stay focused. This process is how I uncovered many of the myths of the Zettelkasten. I need to work on my cussing, don't I? Huh, ladies and gentlemen? This process is how I uncovered many of the myths of the Zettelkasten. This concept is not something I invented, it's something I picked up from the best... Wait, did I just read this? God damn it. How did that happen? We have an issue here, okay. I wrote that twice, or pasted it twice. At the time of this writing, much of Lumen's first Zettelkasten has been transcribed into German text. When you navigate to a note card in the digital archive, there will be a digital text snippet of what the card contains. The text will be in German, however. However, you can use your web browser's translation feature to convert. I don't want to use web browser. That just sounds like a person is, I mean, we know what a browser is, right? Yeah, if you don't, then, figure it out. Okay. However, you can use your browser's translation feature to convert the text into your desired language. From there, simply write the note down by hand. In my experience doing this, I picked up some interesting nuances in how Lumen laid out his thoughts. In one instance, I learned how he would first outline a complex thought with multiple presuppositions. After this, he would create a type of relative link structure for the supporting presuppositions using red letters. Yeah, so I think I point to this instance in his archive, which is, these red letters. Doing this led me to discover how Lumen would write out. Doing this led me to another discovery. Seriously, the shift key doesn't work on these new MacBooks. Hope you like that. This is seriously, like, these MacBook Pros, the keyboard, like, shortcuts, my shift key is just shitting on itself and doesn't, it's like maybe 20% of the time it doesn't pick up that I've pressed it down. Okay. Doing this led me to another discovery. I'm going to throw this computer through the fucking window. I discovered how Lumen would write out entire excerpts and quotes by hand, which I'll detail shortly. In another instance, I decided to neuroimprint Lumen's entire section wherein he... Okay, let's start a new paragraph here. In another instance, I decided to neuroimprint Lumen's entire section wherein he wrote about his Zettelkasten. This proved invaluable during the writing of this book. If I hadn't neuroimprinted this section, I would have likely glossed over the concept of the Zettelkasten as a ruminant. There are countless other examples of neuroimprinting Lumen's archives. Yeah, there are countless other examples of neuroimprinting There are countless other examples of how neuroimprinting Lumen's archives provides value. In brief, I recommend writing out Lumen's actual note cards by hand. I especially recommend this when you're in the early phases of learning about Zettelkasten. Okay. There are a countless number of other examples of how neuroimprinting Lumen's archives In brief, I recommend writing out Lumen's actual note cards by hand. I especially recommend this when you're in the early phases of learning about Zettelkasten. Cool, great, grand, wonderful. The myth that Lumen did not copy down quotes and excerpts. Another absurdity propagated about Zettelkasten is the notion that one should not write down quotes of the text that they're reading. In other words, one should not excerpt. In other words, there's a myth that one should not excerpt. The source of this myth is to be found in Ahrens's How to Take Smart Notes. He writes, Lumen did not just copy ideas or quotes from the texts he read. Technically, Ahrens is correct. Lumen didn't just copy ideas or quotes from the text. He both copied down quotes from texts and wrote down reformulations and elaborated He both copied down quotes from texts and elaborated on such quotes. Yet the way in which Ahrens posits this notion seems to result in many Zettelkasten practitioners interpreting it as an injunction to refrain from the practice of excerpting. This misinterpretation also implies that Lumen did not excerpt quotes in passages from the books he read. As we can see, however, Lumen did excerpt extensively. In the end, this advice isn't just incorrect, it's actually quite harmful because it robs us of a path to learning deeply and learning deeply by way of neuroimprinting ideas on our minds. The notion that you should not write down quotes that resonate with you, or those you're having difficulty understanding, is, quite frankly, absurd. Most of the rewarding bits of knowledge are challenging. At first path, okay, I want to make a little to-do list to myself of, now I need to get back to focusing, but I'm going to make this little checklist. Call it the read out loud checklist. So right now, okay, fuck me. Dude, the keyboard shortcut is killing me. But I can't switch between tabs because Ulysses is not respecting my keyboard shortcut. It's really quite disheartening. Okay. Dude, where's my car? Yeah, I'm gonna make a little to-do list here. Read out loud checklist. Jesus. Just see how many chapters and stuff. In progress. Oh, yeah, I'm gonna make this up. Oh man. Alright, we can do this. We can do this. With you guys. With your help and holding me accountable. I'm just looking at it, I'm like halfway done and I'm like, oh my god. Okay. Got that. I've got like 22 chapters to do this to. What am I thinking, Scott? Like, God, this book is a fucking beast. Okay, perfect timing because we're now talking about the suck. Okay, the suck. My mentor, the late copywriter Gary Halbert, taught others to write copy, that is, persuasive advertisements, through a method he called the suck. This entailed slowly going through the best advertisements in history and writing them out in longhand. He referred to it as a process of neurological imprinting thoughts on the mind. Neurological imprinting. What I urged my attendants to do was copy those letters out in their own handwriting. Why? So they'd actually have a neurological imprint on a cellular level of what it feels like to actually write killer? Okay. Did he really say killer single quote? Let's find out, shall we? Yeah. Fuck. Microsoft Word has a bug, it seems like, where they don't respect single quotes. They like breaks in the transition. Just great. Just fantastic. Whatever. It'll force me to pay attention and proofread this thing. Howard's teachings were quite terse and direct. One of the first lessons entailed simply giving his students a list of roughly 300 advertisement headlines. Students were then asked to handwrite every single headline on a dedicated note card. In my own Antoinette, I have stored all 300 of those ads. From this practice, I'll say this. ... It works. I began to view the world with those ad headlines reverberating in my mind. It became easy for me to test new headlines when working on a client's advertising campaign. I can still recall them today. In ancient times, the practice of writing down thoughts and passages was a form of mental training. It was a thinking process that, for example, was necessary. Do that. was a thinking process that, for example, was necessary not only for thriving in ancient Greece, but also for surviving it. According to Plato, one needed to recall and recite information on the fly without having to consult an external source. The Renaissance scholar and poet Francesco Petrarch, who lived in the 1300s, was one of the first people to reveal the power of neuroimprinting knowledge on the mind. I refer to this concept as neuroimprinting. I do not read without writing, because writing is slower than reading. The more deeply it is impressed and the more tenaciously it sticks in the mind. Benjamin Franklin wasn't particularly advanced in terms of his writing skills when he was young, yet he devised a system that entailed memorizing passages by writing them out by hand. He would then quiz himself and try to complete the passages from a blank slate. Franklin essentially neuroimprinted great writing and used those neuroimprints to shape his own writing style, thus developing his writing skills. In brief, there is much value in excerpting. There is much value in neuroimprinting great ideas on your mind by writing them out by hand. Do not let the false notion that Luhmann didn't do this deter you from carrying forth in this practice. Examples of Luhmann neuroimprinting ideas. There are numerous examples of Luhmann copying down quotes in his Zettelkasten. Both Luhmann's first and second Zettelkasten contains excerpts. Card 7.9 shown previously contained the French quote that continued onto the next card. Other intriguing examples of written excerpts can be found throughout Luhmann's Zettelkasten. Take card 17.11 from his first Zettelkasten. Here we have the card with its English translation on the right-hand side. Sweet. I need to go through my images, I think, and resize them. Yeah, maybe. Let me see something. Fuck. That's a mistake right there. Edit, copy as markdown. Okay, that's test one. Dude. Dude, fucking this new resolution on this screen is gonna make me go blind because it's so freaking small. Okay. Now I'm going to do another test. I'm going to test that if I put in the size component inside Ulysses, that it will then copy into markdown format. Oh, it kind of does. All right. Oh, there's preview. Preview markdown. There. Markdown image. Yeah. Alright. I don't know. Maybe it'll work. Let's see if going to put it in my code editor. Let's see what this looks like. So I don't know, it's not going to give me the image, I don't think. Yeah, because I don't want to do this right now. Alright, let's get back and focus on Xiaomi. Okay. The reason do not excerpt quotes is such harmful advice. The reason this myth is so serious is that the act of writing down something you're interested in learning has been proven to develop a richer and more accurate understanding of the material. Let's see something real quick. Oh my god. Why is that? Okay.